Well, we want to thank everybody for joining us on this past winter series webinar. We have a star-studded group of panelists for you. And I want to thank Chuck Wilson. I want to thank Brian Gard, of course, Max, who's making it all work for us, for all of your help in putting these things together. Today, we are going to hear from Lori Aladeff, the CEO of Make Our Schools Safe, and she's got many more credentials than that and much information to share with us legislatively. I think information that we're all benefiting from, and it feels like, Lori, we're benefiting in the real time. So that's great. Taylor Criddle is also with us, and Jake Parker is with us. I'm going to give them the privilege of introducing themselves so that they make sure all the high points are hit. And of course, my name is Paul Tim. I'm the Director of Education Safety with Allegiant. So glad everybody could be here today. Lori, please begin with an introduction.
Hi, everybody. My name is Lori Alhadaf, and I'm the CEO of the nonprofit organization Make Our Schools Safe. And I am Alyssa's mom. Alyssa was my daughter who was tragically murdered at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School on Valentine's Day 8 years ago. I'm also a member of the Broward County School Board and been on the school board the last 7 years.
Well, and how wonderful of you to keep that introduction very brief. I appreciate that. And Taylor, don't feel intimidated that yours has to be just as brief as well, but please go ahead and introduce yourself.
You, Paul, and it's great to be here with Pass alongside Lori, Jake. Want to do a quick introduction. My name is Taylor Criddle, Vice President of Advocacy and Public Affairs at the Electronic Security Association. I lead ESA state and federal government relations and public policy strategy. So, working on issues that impact the electronic security and life safety industry nationwide. Just my background, quick snapshot before joining ESA. I worked on Capitol Hill and a couple of national political campaigns, which really kind of gave me firsthand experience navigating the legislative process and understanding really how policy decisions are made. From ESA's perspective, as it relates to this webinar, school security isn't about a single device or mandate. And we really feel it's about building a coordinated life safety ecosystem. And so just a little bit of background about ESA. Our members specifically design, install, and monitor the systems that protect schools every day. So that includes fire alarms, intrusion detection, access control, video surveillance, and emergency communications. And what we consistently see is that, safety works best when policy, funding, standards, and technology move together. And now where things become challenging is when mandates outpace infrastructure, funding, or operational planning. Whether we're talking about Alyssa's Law, digital mapping, or broader compliance requirements, the intent is absolutely right. It's to protect students and staff. But long-term success depends on sustainability, interoperability, training, and obviously ongoing maintenance with these systems. And our role here at ESA is to help lawmakers specifically understand the technical realities on the ground. So that means what integrates, what scales, what requires upkeep, and what truly enhances safety without creating unfunded burdens. And so we want to move from reactive compliance to thoughtful design, where systems are practical, fundable, and effective. Thanks, Jim.
Excellent. And I appreciate that. I know, Lori, you're joining us from Florida. Taylor, where are you today?
I am in sunny Sacramento, California.
Okay. And so I didn't expect sunny. That's what we usually get with Florida, but we'll take that in Sacramento. And Jake, before you introduce yourself, where are you joining us from today?
From suburban Maryland, just outside of DC.
Okay, that's what I thought. So please go ahead and give us a little bit of your background.
Hi, so I'm Jake Parker with the Security Industry Association, lead government relations for the organization, but also have been involved with PASS, Partner Alliance for Safer Schools, for many years. Our organization is one of the co-founding organizations of PASS. And just real quickly, our outlook and priorities for school safety. Our association represents primarily manufacturers, but also systems integrators and installers, maintainers of security systems of all sorts. But we support initiatives like the PASS guidelines that encourage nationwide use of best practices and making sure that information is available, helping the end users of technology products and services to make the most of what they have. We are also active on the advocacy front in supporting financial assistance for schools that struggle with the cost of meeting their security needs. So this is both at the federal level, been active in that, but also support the adoption of successful state school security assistance programs. And so more to share later, but that's a quick intro.
Well, that's great. That's terrific. And I'm joining us today from Chicago. And so we have the Central Time Zone, two of you in Eastern Time Zone, and Taylor out in Pacific. Very, very spread out group of people here today. I do want to talk about the topics that we're going to address, and you can see them here on your screen. But first of all, I think whenever we have a PASS webinar, there might be people who are wondering or new to the Partner Alliance for Safer Schools. I just want to talk a little bit about it. PASS is a non-for-profit that is made up of architects, practitioners, vendors and manufacturers, et cetera, who have all agreed to kind of put aside their own personal agendas and agree on guidelines that all schools should be following. And over the years, PASS has done a really great job of getting embedded in places where people say, wow, these guidelines truly are agnostic, and we're happy to espouse them, including schoolsafety.gov, which is the federal repository for school safety and emergency preparedness. They recommend PASS guidelines. And the guidelines are a fairly lengthy set. We have to define terms. So I want to invite you to go to pass.org, passk12.org to download those guidelines. But at the end of the guidelines, you have checklists for self-assessment, and you can just print those, or we're working on all kinds of digital options at this point, but it allows you to kind of get an idea of where you are as baselines. I'm not going to go through all of the details with PASS, but I will tell you that it was just a couple months ago that we published version 7, and some would say, wow, why have you gone through almost as many versions as the iPhone? But it's because things are developing, things are evolving, and we want to stay on top of everything that's happening. And really, I think the hallmark of version 7 is that we've put in a new layer. There are 5 layers. This layer is the digital infrastructure layer. And we just said, hey, in terms of data privacy and cybersecurity, all of that is involved now with schools. We have to really make sure that we're laying down some guidelines. And so again, experts amongst the PASS members put that layer together, and it joins the district-wide layer, the property and parking lot layer, then the digital infrastructure layer. The building layer is layer number 4, and then the 5th and final layer is your classroom and interior layer. So those are a few of the things that I wanted to say about PASS. I'm going to change the screen here in just a minute, so don't get vertigo, because I want you to be able to see all of the panelists, but I want to talk about school safety efforts that are happening both with ESA and the Security Industry Association. Jake, I hope I have your permission to call it SIA, but I want to have you guys talk a little bit about that. So let me just do a quick stop share and bring everybody here together. Let's talk a little bit, Taylor, about what ESA is doing with school safety in general. And then Jake, I'll have you follow.
Yeah, well, thank you, Tim. Or Paul, sorry. We obviously view school security as a shared responsibility and really a long-term commitment here at ESA. This is one of our core issues, and our legislative efforts in school security focus specifically on obviously engagement and implementation clarity. Um, Having all of those parts kind of integrate together on the ground and trying to reduce compliance as much as possible. So we actively track and engage legislation across states related to panic alert systems, digital mapping, which I'm sure I'm going to get into later in this webinar, emergency communications, and really kind of broader safety modernization efforts. So when bills are introduced, our role is to provide technical insight so lawmakers can better understand how these systems integrate, almost like an ecosystem within existing life safety infrastructure, and what really what long-term maintenance is going to require. And so we also emphasize, and this is a big one, sustainable funding. Everyone here knows schools operate under tight budgets, and modernization efforts need realistic financial support to ensure, consistent implementation. And so ultimately, our goal is to help translate strong policy intent into durable and workable solutions through laws that improve safety, not just on paper, but in practice. And there's a number of bills that we are tracking and have been tracking that relate to school security, and relate to digital mapping and school mapping data grant programs. I think there's one out here in California, Assembly Bill 598, that is going through it right now. But we've seen this in Florida, Texas, New Jersey, and really our goal here is to, again, educate and help guide lawmakers to providing and putting out policy as it relates to school security that works.
Yeah, thank you. And Jake, before I have you talk a little bit about what SIA is doing, Taylor, I wanted to ask you, when we're seeing legislation come, whether it's at the state level or federal level, sometimes it's from a nonprofit that has advocacy enablement. Sometimes it's from providers or lobbyists who represent providers. If you could just talk a little bit about that, because I know it's just now a couple of years ago that there was some weapons detection legislation in a certain state that was really being driven by a provider, and that maybe didn't sit well with people. Tell me, how do you work your way through all of that?
Yeah. I feel like every industry, every issue has, or every issue has this kind of issue where there's so many different layers, there's so many different groups. You have companies advocating for one thing on a particular issue. You have nonprofits advocating, and then you have third house lobbyists or firms that are hired guns essentially to advocate on a specific issue. So it can get it can get pretty muddy. And I think the key here is, and one thing that I will say that the electronic security life safety space has done a very good job about, me being with ESA, Jake with SIA, is having a unified front, a coalition. And having a coalition on a particular issue is so key. I cannot stress that enough. And so making sure that the companies, the nonprofits, the lobbyists that are hired to advocate are all on the same page on a particular issue. And as it relates to school security, I really feel that for the most part, we have all been on the same page. And I feel like PASS does a really great job with doing that as well,
Good.
keeping
Yeah.
everyone together.
And I appreciate that. And I love the word coalition. Anytime we're talking about that, I'm glad. So, Jake, let's talk a little bit about SIA. And I think Taylor and I have left enough other breadcrumbs for you to maybe address some of what you're seeing from the legislative side of things as well.
So what you just were asking about is exactly why we really support the idea of having widely accepted best practices that are followed. So, there's a lot of things in school safety that could be done at the legislative level and helpful things. In all of those things have to be judged within I hope within the framework of the guidelines and other resources, as to whether it's something that is, worthwhile or something that schools, want, need or not. So, um, that's the anyway. That's why it's important to use that as a measuring stick. So, I'll just say from our ditto and everything Taylor said as far as our industries, approach to all this. We obviously represent the same industry, but did want to provide a update on a couple of federal items.
Yeah.
Before we get into it, one is, one thing that our organization had done is we're a strong supporter of the Stop School Violence Act. It was enacted in 2018, I believe. This in partnered with many across the education community as well on that, which restarted federal grant assistance for school safety purposes. Primarily programs under Department of Justice. Congress just passed its funding measure for the rest of the fiscal year, and has continued to provide funding for that program, which was about $73 million for the COPS SVPP program, which is the most directly utilized for school safety improvements. There's also a Bureau of Justice Assistance program for a couple of other adjacent things that's also been funded. But one thing that we are concerned about is there was some basically an add-on to that program that will expire after this year. It needs that program is going to need more appropriation support to continue. Something we're looking at as far as the next appropriation cycle at the federal level. It's making sure that we request and advocate for. But then another interesting thing is in that same appropriations measure just enacted a few weeks ago, Congress has created a new grant program through the Department of Education called the School Safety Enhancement Grants, which is initially a $20 million program, so not enormous. But it is really focused on schools implementing the recommendations of the Robb Elementary School report, Critical Incident Review, which is unusual. It was a federal look at that incident. And so it really is a lot of focus on doors and locks that can be locked from the inside, and other measures that are pretty foundational to school safety when you look at the guidelines. But so a new opportunity there to have a program that's going to provide assistance. Hopefully that can grow in the future. I would also say the other thing I know as far as the new administration's, or maybe it's not so new now, but the administration's school safety initiatives, the School Safety Task Force is a group of 4 agencies that have come together to put out best practices on schoolsafety.gov, and that's been going on for a number of years now. But they also are in the process now of reviewing the Federal Commission on School Safety report that was first released in 2018. That was a long time ago now. They're updating that, and part of it is going to be a new section on physical security guidelines for improvements. So we're definitely interested to see that when it comes out and help socialize that. But we expect that to come out this summer at some point. So it's something to look out for.
Good. I appreciate that. And I'm going to circle back to it a little bit later for sure. I also want to talk anything biometrics that might be of interest as well. But since we have you here, Lori, I really want to talk about Alyssa's Law and Alyssa's Act. And so let me change the screen and get there again so that so we can see it full. Thank you for those who are being patient with me as I have transitioned from a PC to a Mac in real time. But Lori, please let's before we get into Alyssa's Act, if you could give us some information about Alyssa's Law and then make the distinction, that would be great.
Yes, so thank you. So we have passed Alyssa's Law now in 10 states. And New Jersey was the first state that we passed Alyssa's Law in. I'm from New Jersey, and we used to live in New Jersey. And this is my daughter, Alyssa. And when the tragedy happened in 2018, we had a legislator person reach out to us, and they wanted to honor Alyssa and name a panic button bill after Alyssa. So that's where Alyssa's Law stemmed from. And when we started Make Our Schools Safe, we knew we wanted to specifically focus on school safety. So Alyssa's Law is one of those pillars. And like I said, so we've passed Alyssa's Law in 10 states, and every state does kind of look a little bit different. and that's why we're going to talk about Alyssa's Act at the federal level. But my philosophy is, some states make it mandatory and they also fund it, which obviously that's the goal, have it mandatory and fund it. And a wearable panic button is great. So every teacher has their panic button on day one. And so as we go state by state, some states are a little more hesitant from making it required and putting those pressures on requirements on school boards, and they like, home rule and school boards making those decisions. But I feel like when it comes to school safety standards, those minimum standards are really truly important. And so at our website, makeourschoolsafe.org, we have a clickable map where anyone can reach out to their legislator at the state level, send them an email within seconds, and try to get Alyssa's law passed at the state. Our goal is to pass Alyssa's law in every state. As mandatory, we would love that, and funded, of course, around the country. And one of the things that I say is time equals life. And the faster that we can get help on the scene, we know the more lives that would be saved. Alyssa was in the first classroom, and she was in the direct line of fire when the shooter came down the hallway and was shot 8 times. And so we know that the faster that we can get EMS on the scene, like in the Appalachia shooting, the more lives that we'll save, like the 9 lives that were saved from the people that were shot.
Yeah.
So
Well,
at the federal level, we have Alyssa's Act. And Alyssa's Act is what we're trying to do is create minimum standards around the panic buttons and for digital mapping and to create a data center. And just this past week, I believe it was, we went to the Capitol and we had a press conference. Congressman Burgess Owens is the lead sponsor on the bill from Utah. And this is a bipartisan school safety bill. We all can agree when we send our kids to school that they need to be safe, educated, and come home alive. And so our goal is to get co-sponsors on the bill. It's HR 6809. And we have on makeourschoolsafe.org, we do have another clickable map to send an email to your congressperson to get them on board with being a co-sponsor on this bill. And our goal is to move this as quickly through the House and then over to the Senate and get it to President Trump to sign this into law.
yeah. It's interesting, Lori, because we talk about standardization, and that's why this whole act has kind of come into play, because there were some states that were calling it Alyssa's law and passing that legislation. Although I believe, Lori, there's one outlier state, is it South Carolina, that doesn't call it Alyssa's law at all, but has the main tenets of it. Is that right?
Yeah, it is. We have 12 states currently right now that are going through the legislative process for Alyssa's law.
Yeah.
So we're super excited, and I know that everybody wants those minimum standards. And so that's why Alyssa's Act is so key. So we can get the expert safety people to opine on what those minimum standards look like. Think about it like when we had our fire alarms in 1974, they created those codes, which I'm sure Paul and Taylor and Jake, all about. And we have fire alarms and fire sprinklers in every school. You wouldn't think about going to school without having them.
Yeah. Yeah, that's excellent. And I want to bring it back to us all being able to see each other here. Thank you for doing that. But I know this, and Taylor and Jake, as we move forward, I know we're going to talk about digital mapping now, but I think, sometimes you guys have knowledge of building codes, fire codes, whatever they might be. And as we move forward, let's talk about the importance of having those things, because sometimes solutions with great intentions are put forward, but then we say, well, wait a minute, that would work against what we've already gotten ground in, for example, in fire safety. But Lori, I wanted to just say one more thing before we move on to digital mapping, and then I turn it over to you, Taylor. But Lori, in Alyssa's Act, it's going to have the word shall and not should. It's going to be an overarching, this is the right thing to do, but not a mandate. If you could talk with us a little bit about the difference there, and then what the hope would be in terms of funding. Is your hope to see that funding stay at a state level or actually be exacted at a state level? Because it's not in some states. Or would your hope be that it would be at a federal level?
Well, so there is no funding connected with Alyssa's Act currently
Okay.
right now.
Okay.
The Federal Clearinghouse already has funding within it currently right now. So listen, I think obviously we want mandatory, we want these minimum standards to be mandatory. And little by little, right, we could get there. I think the most important thing is at the end of the day, we're kind of all rowing in the right direction, and us collaborating and coming together. And at the end of the day, it's the legislators that are guiding this legislation and the wording in that legislation and what that specifically looks like. But we haven't done enough to protect our kids in the schools. Unfortunately, we continue to have school shootings almost weekly around the country. I mean, you don't even hear about some school shootings because the media is not even covering it if only one person gets shot. I mean, how horrible is that? So we need to do more, and Alyssa's Act will set those standards around emergency response for the panic buttons and the digital mapping system. And at the end of the day, we're trying to prevent the next school shooting, and we're also trying to mitigate loss of life if a school shooting happens, so we can get help there faster.
Yeah. Thank you. And I know this is a natural segue from Alyssa's Act, which has that whole digital mapping side to it. Taylor, I think this would be a perfect opportunity for you to share a little bit about what you know about digital mapping.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Well, I can tell you, and I kind of mentioned it a little bit, we're seeing a quite a few trends around digital mapping as it relates to school security. I know, as I mentioned, again, California has a current bill. We've seen some bills in Florida, New Jersey, uh, Texas, New York. Um, but as I mentioned, what we're seeing is a clear increase in legislative interest specifically around digital mapping, but the policy approaches vary significantly from state to state. So in many states, digital mapping is being incorporated into the broader school safety packages, often alongside panic alert systems like Alyssa's Law, emergency communication requirements, and updates to school safety plans. And I think the underlying goal is, of course, consistent that lawmakers want first responders to have faster, better situational awareness during an emergency. And to just give a quick snapshot of, to answer your question, what digital mapping is it's essentially a secure, interactive digital blueprint of a school campus that first responders can access during an incident. So it shows building layouts, entrances, exits, and critical safety infrastructure so that response can be faster and more informed. Now, where we're seeing variation is how the legislation is structured. Some states include digital mapping in very general terms, simply requiring schools to implement it without specifying maintenance standards, interoperability expectations, or funding mechanisms. Other states attempt to be more detailed, tying the requirement to appropriations, standards alignment, or responder coordination. And then another trend that we're noticing, and this is a big one, is that many drafts don't fully address the life cycle of digital maps. So what does that mean? Schools remodel, entrances change, portable classrooms are added or taken away. And without clear guidance on who maintains the system, and how often updates must occur, the risk is that a mandated solution then becomes outdated over time. So, broadly speaking, digital mapping is gaining traction as part of school safety modernization efforts, but the degree of policy maturity varies, and that's where stakeholder engagement really becomes critical.
Yeah. Yeah, I appreciate that. I'm in the state of Illinois, and they have done a pretty good job of talking about how the school has to house this project of digital mapping and update it annually. So that they've given fairly clear guidelines in there. I don't want to speak out of turn, but I know that, the funding for it and how that's accessed and how much is available, that has greatly varied. And so I think it's a concern to everybody. Tell me what you want me to do, and then tell me how I'm supposed to get that done, especially if I've got limited funding, which in the end is what we all face. Jake, did you want to add anything to digital mapping, or have we covered enough ground here before we turn to things like biometrics?
Sorry, no, I think we've covered that pretty well.
Yeah, I know that you and I had talked off this webinar a little bit about biometrics, and it's great. Application in schools is maybe still in the future, but I think the term biometrics makes everybody interested. Are we talking about hand geometry? Are we talking about a thumb? Are we talking about something involving our eye, something that's optical? Tell us a little bit about what you know or what you've seen with this, Jake.
Yeah, so I mean, there's a number of applications of biometrics that we believe are appropriate in schools. So there's been some questions about this, some concerns that have come up in a number of states that have looked at whether there should be any restrictions. For example, New York state currently restricts facial recognition technology in schools. But really, there's a education effort here that needs to occur. That's actually one thing I wanted to say about our role here as an industry association. We would love to assist technology leaders that are in the school safety space in kind of explaining these things and making sure we have good policy on it. A really good case here was in Colorado this last year. There was a proposal to completely ban the use of that technology, facial recognition, in schools without really understanding what the positive use cases there could be. And so we came alongside technology leaders from various districts there. And what they ended up doing was restricting the use of the technology except for if it's educational use in a board-approved curriculum or specific safety and security uses that where you have these common features in video security systems that most schools use, have the ability to use face matching so that you can maybe quickly find a missing student. That was one of the use cases they talked about quite a bit, or alert staff to the possible presence of individuals who are by district determination or court order not permitted to be on the premises. And that could have some, important safety implications.
Yeah,
so
thank you.
As an example,
No,
but other areas we would love to work with the education community on where we can help provide a vendor neutral subject matter expertise.
I appreciate that, and pardon the interruption. I know that it's impossible to have a legislative discussion without saying the term artificial intelligence. So there you go. I've let the cat out of the bag. But it's interesting, and Lori, I want to hear a little bit about what you say about this because you're a school board member and have been now for a number of years. It's interesting because I'll go to a show where there's new providers sharing new solutions, and they'll say, "Oh, our wearable duress piece also has the ability to be video. So I've pressed it in an emergency, and now it's taking video." Lori, I didn't think that I would ever live to see the day where any video surveillance of any kind was in classrooms. I thought we would never it would be in hallways, it would be in parking areas but never in a restroom and never in a classroom. But we're in a place where it is in classrooms now, and then being attached to things like perhaps ultimately Alyssa's law. What are your thoughts about that, and what do you think the parents' pulse would be?
Well, so here in Florida, we have put in some videos in classrooms with students with special needs. It was a pilot program in Florida for a year, And so it's been positive. Some parents do like it because if a situation happens with their child, they're able to go back to the video feed to see it. We have here in Broward County that if the panic button is pressed and the school goes into a lockdown, our real-time crime center, Broward Sheriff's Office, they have the ability to pull up the cameras within the school so they can get eyes on the scene, which is wonderful because then they can tell their school resource officer exactly what's going on, where to go to take down the threat if needed.
Yeah. Yep, agreed. Taylor and Jake, no pressure to weigh in on this, but I know whenever we're talking about artificial intelligence, there are things that arise. And Jake, you open this can of worms. You don't have to go any further on it, but I wonder if either of you have thoughts about the advent of artificial intelligence and school safety that you'd like to share.
I think the cat's definitely out of the bag. Obviously, we're seeing a huge uptick in proposed bills within artificial intelligence, within school security, and a lot of it outside of school security as well. I think we're starting to also see states set up their own commissions on how to navigate AI as it relates to transparency, ethics. And so, it's an issue that I think everyone is kind of navigating as we move along and down this road that, I mean, there's no stopping it. It's a freight train coming our way. Well, it's already here, but I think it's a matter of how do we handle it? How do we manage it? How do we deal with data privacy as it relates to schools? And moving together as an industry on this to make sure that safety and our schools are protected.
Yep. Jake, anything to add on that? We've got you on mute still. That's okay. I'm going to move on. Lori, I have a question for you, and I don't expect you to be the expert, but I do wonder what your opinion would be. I know that in some states, as soon as Alyssa's law was passed, there were a dozen companies who said, we can fulfill this for the school district. And some states have been very good about saying, hold on now, not all of them could fulfill it. Even as I see vendors on exhibit floors and showing me their latest solution, they'll say, oh, and this would satisfy the requirements for Alyssa's law, but it is not that simple. And I just wonder what you've seen, Lori, in terms of the guardrails and boundaries to keep the solutions who can really actually meet those needs in the forefront and not everybody, including Chuck in the truck, around.
Right. So some states, what they do is they have a set of standards and requirements, and they do an RFP, and then those companies have to apply for the RFP to then be possibly chosen to be one of the possible vendors for the school district to choose from maybe say 3 or 4 different vendors hypothetically to roll out Alyssa's law to get the panic button in their school. Which I think is a good idea. My Make Our School Safe Advisory Board, we created a guideline, Alyssa's Law guideline book, which is on our website, makeourschoolsafe.org. And so we did that because we want states legislators to have some type of guidance to go back to figure out, how to best implement this once Alyssa's law is passed. And then I'm very optimistic that we're going to get Alyssa's Act passed at the federal level. So we have that federally, that minimum standard, right? Like our fire alarms for our panic buttons and our digital mapping so that our states would have a reference point. And then, we just keep improving Alyssa's law by every state that passes it.
Yeah. Yeah, I know a question came in already, Jake, about funding, and you're the one who talked about it a little bit. I don't expect you to answer these questions, but I do know the COPS grant, which funds school resource officers to a certain extent, is one that's always a springtime application, and then in the summer is when awards are announced. and you could just put COPS grant into a search engine, you'll be able to find it. Can you point us, Jake, to any other ways that there are time frames for these grants, or where people should go to look for them?
Yeah, the school security grants under the COPS program, which is different than the COPS grants that we're talking about, that is usually a March time frame when it's open, and the application window is pretty narrow. It's like 30 days, and I think it's probably similar for the COPS grants, the hiring grants, which would fund SROs. So definitely look for that next month.
Yes, and schoolsafety.gov, I'm being reminded here, thankful for people who are texting real time. Schoolsafety.gov has a funding page, and it's, I think, probably the easiest way to find out details on these kinds of things. What we don't want people to do is say funds were available, but I had no idea how to access those funds. Schoolsafety.gov is going to be a help to you for sure. Okay, I'm going to
Well, if I could mention one thing, Paul, I'm sorry. The SIA also has a resource on school safety or funding sources, which I wanted to mention. We make that available free to school personnel and staff. So if you I know you'll provide our contact information, but if you reach out, we're happy to provide that to you. That not only provides the list of federal best sources, but also all of the state programs that we're aware of.
Thank you, Jake. So helpful. I wanted to call upon Max, who has been making everything go here, to help a little bit with the Q&A section that we're headed to next. But before I get to the Q&A section, Max, I wanted to mention just a couple more things in terms of resources for PASS, because sometimes people are wondering. And so let me just share and get to that place where we can look at some of those resources. Thank you for your patience. Version 7, I've talked about already, is available, and it answers some of the questions that you see here in the bulleted list. Processes are always what determines the value of a lot of the systems that we have, whether it's video surveillance, communications, in many cases, emergency notification and access control. But these are some of the things that we want you to know about. I've referred to the guidelines, which you can download at passk12.org. The guidelines are followed at the end by those checklists that I mentioned, but we've got a lot more information for you. Drill recommendations, white papers. We are always talking about, because of building codes and fire codes, the dangers of barricade devices. In addition to that, we'll mention in some of these white papers that the Sandy Hook After Action Report and the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas After Action Report have both detailed that the bad guy has never breached a closed and locked classroom door. The mechanism that's a commercial grade mechanism is going to be enough. You don't need to add on to that. So those barricade white papers, fact sheets. We've got a whole lot of other white papers as well, including security vestibules, also institutions, educational institutions that are private, faith-based institutions. We have white papers for you as well. And then PASS has all kinds of training that's available, both on site, but so much of it can be found at the website as well, webinars like these. So I now have, I think, exhausted myself talking about those, but I'm going to stop sharing. And Max, if you've got some questions that you could filter our way, I would love for you to do that.
Yeah, perfect. Great job, everyone. At this time, it's actually a pretty quiet bunch here, and there are no questions at the time. So we encourage everyone right now to, if you have questions, feel free to ask. We've got a great group of panel here that can answer those.
Yeah. Well, as long as we're waiting for questions, I have a couple. And this is where, the panelists begin to put on their seatbelts and say, here we go, what's Paul going to talk about? But Lori, since, I'm a big supporter of yours and Moss, I know that a lot of times questions come up about student-led groups in schools. And so if you could talk a little bit about Moss clubs and what that involves and how that would get started at a school level, I would love to hear about that.
Thank you. So MOS clubs are student-led safety clubs in high schools and middle schools. It's a free program, and we believe that our students really help to create that culture of safety within their school. And so by having our teachers and our school resource officers and our administration being able to form relationships with our students and our MOS clubs, it will help to create that culture of safety in their school. And so they do activities. We have a whole handbook on it. We have a Moss Club director. And just last week, we had 10 Moss Club students from around the country come to the Capitol to go around to their congressmen and congresswomen and talk to them about how important it is to pass Alyssa's Act so that they feel safer in school. You know, our students are in doing these lockdown drills, and they want to be empowered to make a difference. And so I say your voice is your power. And so our Moss Club students are making impact and making difference. And you can go to our website, makeourschoolsafe.org, and click on Moss Clubs, fill out a form, and we would love to start a Moss Club at your school.
Yeah. Thank you, Lori. And this one is for Jake first and Taylor second. If you need to add anything, Taylor, no pressure. But I know that people have said, "Hey, Paul, there's been a lot of talk about nonprofit organizations that are 501(c)(3)s, and we can name some of them: the Partner Alliance for Safer Schools, Safe and Sound Schools, the I Love You Guys Foundation, and then there are some organizations, National Council of School Safety Directors, that are maybe a 501(c)(6). Jake, if you could talk with us a little bit about the distinction there, and then Taylor, if you want to add to that, that would be great. Or Taylor, you could begin the discussion.
Yeah, no worries. So, obviously there are a number of similarities and differences with some nuances there between a 501(c)(3) and C6. But to keep it simple, as everyone knows, a C3 is a charitable organization. So they're typically focused on, education or educating on an issue, raising awareness, research is involved or included in that, and also some sort of direct community support. So donations to them are tax deductible, and their lobbying activity is extremely limited. That's the 501(c)(3). 501(c)(6), like ESA, like SIA, is a trade association. We represent industries and businesses. Our role is to really advocate on behalf of our members, the industry, and very much so engage in public policy, educating lawmakers about how legislation impacts real world operations, the industry, etc. Now, both structures play an important role in school security. One often drives public awareness and research, and the other ensures policies are practical, technically sound, and implementable. So I hope that answers your question on
It does.
501(c)(3), C6.
It,
Okay.
it does. I appreciate it. And I also see, Max, here a couple questions that have come in. I'm going to go ahead with them and not wanting to upstage you, so interrupt me at any time. But it's somebody from Maine who's a school resource officer is asking a question about digital mapping and wondering if we could talk about, if they're going to get a COPS grant, who would they use for this? We're not going to give names of the providers, but in general, when we're talking about digital mapping, we're talking about software that puts all of these things together, not an app. I just want to be perfectly clear about that for Douglas. It's not an app. It would be a software project, and usually an entity is going to come in and put all of these things together. I know Taylor talked a little bit about it, but the current layout of your building, but where utilities are, roof access, all of those things in a secure place that then your responders have access to. If you want to, Douglas, get a hold of me offline, please, paul.tim@allegiant.com. We can talk a little bit more about it, and I can give you some names. Frank has asked a question about silent panic alarms for schools. And he's asking if that's just a button at the front office or does it include wearable panic devices? Well, Alyssa's law is definitely not the panic button at the front desk. The panic button at the front desk is usually installed by a third-party monitoring group. And if somebody, let's say an administrative assistant, hit that panic button, or maybe we've got one in the principal's office, that signal is going to be sent to a third-party monitoring station. They're going to contact the school to see if it's a legitimate issue and law enforcement. But Lori, what we're talking about with Alyssa's law is something that everybody's going to have access to and routes directly to the police. And that's why wearable duress, you can add to what I'm saying, that's why wearable duress seems to be the soup du jour in getting that done most effectively.
Mhm.
And if you wanted to add anything to that, Lori, that would be fine. Or did you think I covered
Right.
it?
Like, yeah, it depends on how the law reads.
Yeah.
Some might just say like an emergency response duress button. And then it kind of opens it up to be an app-based panic button or a wearable panic button. In New Jersey, the first state that passed Alyssa's law, it actually was a panic button in the front office, but the panic button went directly to law enforcement 911 center, so they can get there as quickly as possible if there's an active shooter on campus. But our goal is to have Alyssa's Law funded. I see the funding question in the next block, and so it is absolutely our goal to have Alyssa's Law funded and mandatory. I'm a school board member. We do not like unfunded mandates. So I hear you, Stefan, and
Yeah.
we're working on that.
And he's a rock star in the state of Illinois, where I could not hold you in a higher regard. Thank you for joining in here in the chat, Stefan. But yeah, the difficulty is always the unfunded mandate. And my hope is that once Alyssa's Act is passed, that states will then really pursue funding to a much better extent than what we've seen so far. Douglas Paul is my first name, Tim, Timm, Paul.Tim. Yep, it's reversible like a bad suit, at allegion.com, Allegion, allegion.com. You can contact Lori if you'd like through Make Our Schools Safe. Lori would be accessible that way. Taylor, how would somebody get a hold of you if they said, I just can't get enough of Taylor?
Yeah, it'll be taylor.criddle@esaweb.org. I'll put my email in the chat, and that's taylor.criddle@esaweb.org.
Yep, thank you. And I see that Max is helping us with that. So from your lips to Max's fingertips, that's the way it's gone. And Jake, okay with us giving your contact information out as well?
Yeah, that would be fine. Thank you.
Yeah. And Jake is the closest of us to DC. So by definition, he's the most powerful of us as well. Okay. Any other questions, Max, that have come up? If not, I'm going to do a last word here, round robin, for the panelists.
We are all set for the round robin.
Okay, good. Lori, you get a final couple of words, and then I'll move on to Taylor and Jake. Any challenges, any encouragements for those who have joined us today?
So thank you so much. Wait, did you want me to speak?
Yes, it's all you, Lori.
Thank you so much for having me on today, Paul. I really appreciate being here and letting me have the opportunity to talk about Make Our Schools Safe and Alyssa's Law and Alyssa's Act. But please, we need your help. Go to makeourschoolsafe.org and join the school safety movement.
Thank you. Okay, Taylor.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I'll start by saying, we ESA 100% support you, Lori, and Alyssa's Law, and we look forward to working with you at the state and federal level, and I appreciate everything that you've done. And I'll close with this. Everyone in this conversation, I think, wants the same outcomes, safer schools. The technology is here. The expertise is here. I think what matters now is how we align policy with, as I mentioned earlier, real world implementation. So from ESA's perspective, the most effective school security policies, I think, combine, obviously, clear goals, sustainable funding, as some of the questions in the chat kind of alluded to, technical standards, which was also kind of mentioned here, codes, and really long-term maintenance planning. A mandate alone doesn't create safety. I think coordination does.
Good.
And that's where coalitions really also kind of come in to support this and lift it up. And so when policymakers, engage industry early and align with established best practices like PASS, for example, schools then end up with solutions that work not just in theory but in practice. And I just want to thank everyone for joining us here on the call today, and let you all know that ESA, myself, stand ready to be partners in that work.
Thank you so much, Tyler, or Taylor. And then you told me that people accidentally call you Tyler, and that's what happened.
Yeah, it's fine. Yeah.
And then Jake, I have air hugs for you because I know you're as hardworking as anybody, and scheduling has not been easy. Thank you so much for making yourself available. Any final words of encouragement for people who have joined us today?
You're welcome. And I just, our organization is definitely here to support you and those that are in the important work of school safety. What we do, what our industry does, obviously, is just one piece of the whole puzzle as far as making our schools safer. We recognize that, but it's an important one. And I think if you look back over historically, there needs to be a healthy amount of attention paid to this, which there maybe wasn't 20 years ago. So, look forward to working with you. And Lori, thank you. We're going to support you in your efforts as well as ESA. So maybe we should connect on how we can do that more closely. But in any case, just feel free to reach out to us if there's anything we can do to support you in your work.
Well, I want to thank you all again. And I'm going to end with a quick story. Almost 30 years ago, when I started in school safety, I didn't know where to find a lot of information. I went to the library. Yes, I went to a library, and I got a book, and it was called Loss Prevention. And I remember the first law of loss prevention that the author mentioned was effective loss prevention, which is what we all want, is always preceded by extensive losses. It's a law. It's why our neighbor doesn't get a burglar alarm system until after their house is burglarized. And what I've been advocating for these almost 30 years is let's break that law. Let's be proactive. Let's do what we can. And if we can't do it now, in the name of protecting kids, we'll never be able to do it. So that's my challenge for all of you. I want to thank Max and Brian, and of course, Lori, Taylor, Jake, Dennis, who's working behind the scenes, and everybody at PASS for making this whole thing available to our attendees today. Thank you for everything you're doing to make schools safe. Thank you.